The pecan pie was still warm in my hands. When my daughter-in-law stood up from the dinner table and screamed in my face, "Pay the rent or get out." Christmas lights blinked red and green through the window behind her. The turkey I'd spent 4 hours preparing sat half-eaten on plates nobody had thanked me for. Celeste's crimson nails, the ones I'd paid for at the salon last week, pointed at me like weapons. Her voice cut through the room, sharp enough to draw blood. "This arrangement isn't working anymore. Rhonda, you're living here rent-free, taking up our space, using our utilities, eating our food." Our food. The turkey I'd bought with my Social Security check. The stuffing made from bread I'd purchased and paid for. The vegetables I'd peeled and chopped while she got her nails done. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. My hand started shaking. The pie dish felt slippery between my palms. I was 68 years old, standing in what used to be my own dining room, holding dessert for people who looked at me like I was a stain on their expensive furniture. "I contribute," I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "I buy groceries. I cook. I clean. I help with that's not rent." Celeste stepped closer. Her perfume, another gift I'd filled the space between us. "This is our house now. We're paying the mortgage. We're covering the bills, and frankly, we need the space for a home office. Garrett's business is expanding." I turned to my son. Garrett sprawled in the chair at the head of the table. My chair, the one his father, Philip, had built from reclaimed oak 40 years ago. Garrett met my eyes for just a second before looking away, picking at something on his sleeve that wasn't there. There. 2 teenagers sat at the far end of the table, hunched over their phones. They didn't even look up. Didn't flinch when their mother raised her voice at their grandmother. Didn't care that this was Christmas dinner and their father was letting his wife destroy his own mother. $1,200 a month, Celeste said. Each word landed like a stone in my stomach. "Pay the rent or get out. You have until New Year's to decide." $1,200. My entire Social Security check was $1,400. That would leave me $200 for everything else. Food, medicine, car insurance, gas, everything I needed to survive. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the pie dish tighter, feeling the heat burn through the oven mitts into my palms. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Not on Christmas. Not in the house I'd signed over to them 3 years ago when they promised to take care of me forever. I looked at Garrett again. My son, the boy I'd rocked to sleep during thunderstorms. The teenager I'd driven to baseball practice 6 days a week for 4 years straight. The young man whose college education I'd helped fund by working double shifts at the hospital where I'd been a nurse for 35 years. Garrett? His name came out as a question, soft and broken. He looked up at me, then really looked at me. And he smiled. Not the smile I remembered from his childhood. Not the grateful smile he'd given me when I signed over the house deed. This smile was cold, mean. The smile of a stranger who wanted me to hurt. "Let's see how you survive now, Mom," he said. His voice carried across the table like ice cracking underweight. "Welcome to the real world." Something inside my chest cracked, not my heart, that had already broken when Philip died 3 years ago. This was different. This was the sound of something freezing over, turning hard and cold and unmovable, like water becoming ice, like kindness becoming steel. I set the pecan pie down on the table. Nobody reached for it. Nobody said anything. The teenagers kept scrolling through their phones. Celeste crossed her arms and stared at me, waiting for me to beg, to cry, to apologize for being a burden. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I walked out of that dining room without another word. My feet moved across the floor I'd mopped 1,000 times. Past the living room where I'd wrapped their Christmas presents at midnight. Because wrapping paper was expensive and I'd wanted to save them money. Through the kitchen where I'd stood for 4 hours that morning preparing a meal nobody appreciated. I walked to the converted garage where I'd been living for 3 years. The place they called the mother-in-law suite, but was really just a garage with a space heater and a bathroom. So small I had to turn sideways to reach the toilet. The place that had no proper heating and smelled like motor oil, no matter how much I cleaned. My hands shook as I pulled my 2 suitcases from under the narrow bed. But they weren't shaking from fear. They were shaking from something else, something that felt like power I'd forgotten I had. I packed my clothes first. Each piece folded carefully the way my own mother had taught me 60 years ago. Sweaters Philip had bought me for winter, the dress I'd worn to his funeral, the practical cotton sets I'd lived in since he got sick because pretty things didn't matter anymore when the person you wanted to look pretty for was gone. Then I packed my photographs. Philip on our wedding day looking at me like I'd hung the moon. Young Garrett blowing out birthday candles back when his eyes were soft and full of love. Holidays that felt like they'd happened to different people in a different lifetime. My jewelry box went in next. The simple pieces Philip had given me over the years. Nothing expensive, nothing worth stealing, but everything precious because his hands had chosen them. His voice had said, "I love you." When he'd given them to me, his smile had made them priceless. At the bottom of my underwear drawer, beneath the cotton I'd worn for 3 years, I found the envelope. Thick cream-colored paper still sealed. The one my lawyer had sent me 6 months ago with a note that said, "Open this when you're ready to know the truth about what you're worth." I'd been too scared to open it before. Too afraid of what it might mean. Too worried about what decisions I'd have to make if I knew what was inside. I wasn't scared anymore. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed in the converted garage and opened the envelope. Inside were documents, bank statements, investment summaries, property records, numbers that made my breath catch in my throat. Numbers that changed everything. $400,000 from Philip's life insurance policy, the one we'd maintained for 40 years. Paying premiums even when money was tight because we'd promised to take care of each other. The policy that paid out when he died. The money I'd invested wisely with a financial advisor named Marvin, who told me to be patient. To let it grow, to not tell anyone until I was ready. That $400,000 had grown to nearly $600,000 with careful investments and the proceeds from selling our rental properties. The properties Garrett didn't know about. The ones Philip and I had bought 20 years ago and paid off slowly, quietly, without telling anyone because we'd learned that family asking for money could destroy relationships faster than anything else. Garrett and Celeste didn't know about any of it. They'd assumed the hospital pension and Social Security were all I had. They'd never asked questions, never wondered why I'd signed over a fully paid-off house without negotiating harder. They'd been too eager, too certain they were getting everything they deserved. Too busy calculating what they'd gain to wonder what I might be hiding. I'd wanted to see who my son really was without money changing the equation. I'd wanted to know if he'd take care of me because he loved me or because he thought I had something worth inheriting. My lawyer had warned me. "Rhonda, this is dangerous. What if they treat you badly? What if they take advantage?" I told him I needed to know the truth. That I'd rather know my son's real character than live in comfortable ignorance. Well, now I knew. I pulled out my phone and called a ride share. The driver arrived 15 minutes later, a young woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice who helped me load my suitcases into her trunk without asking questions. She could probably tell this wasn't a vacation, that something had broken tonight, that I was leaving pieces of myself behind. As we pulled away from the house that used to be mine, that should still be mine, I didn't look back. I gave her an address on the other side of town and watched the Christmas lights blur past my window. We drove for 20 minutes. The neighborhood's changed, the houses got larger, the lawns more carefully maintained. Gates appeared at the entrances to private drives. Streets got quieter, prettier, safer. "This is it?" the driver asked when we pulled up to a contemporary 2-story home with large windows glowing warm yellow light into the cold December night. A 3-car garage, a front yard with professional landscaping, a mailbox with a number I'd memorized 6 months ago. "This is it," I confirmed. She looked at me like maybe I'd given her the wrong address. Like maybe an old woman with 2 suitcases on Christmas night didn't belong in a neighborhood like this. Like maybe she should ask if I was sure. But I was already pulling out my keys. The ones I'd been carrying in my purse for 6 months. The keys to the house I'd bought with Philip's life insurance money. The house Garrett knew nothing about. The house that was mine. All mine. No shared deed. No arrangement, no mother-in-law suite, just my name on the title and my future inside those walls. I tipped the driver $50 in cash. She'd earned it for not asking questions, for being kind when kindness felt rare. For helping an old woman escape on Christmas night without making her feel small. She drove away and I stood on my front porch, keys in my hand, looking at my home. My beautiful secret home that I'd been furnishing slowly for half a year while living in that garage, while letting them think I had nothing. While testing them to see how low they'd go. They'd gone lower than I'd imagined possible. I unlocked my front door and stepped inside. The house smelled like vanilla and cinnamon from the candles I'd lit yesterday when I'd stopped by to check on things. The furniture I'd chosen myself, not hand-me-downs, not garage sale finds, sat arranged exactly how I wanted. A cream-colored sofa, a reading chair by the window, bookshelves I'd built myself, already filled with novels I'd been collecting. I walked through each room slowly. The kitchen with granite countertops and a gas range I dreamed about for years. Stainless steel appliances that worked properly. A dishwasher that didn't leak. Cabinet space for all my dishes instead of the 3 square feet I'd had in the garage. The living room had a fireplace, a real one with wood stacked beside it that I'd bought myself. Built-in shelves lined one wall, painted white. Organized with books sorted by color because it looked pretty and nobody could tell me it was impractical. Upstairs, my bedroom had a walk-in closet. A whole room just for clothes and an ensuite bathroom with a soaking tub deep enough to actually relax in, heated floors. A shower with water pressure that didn't sputter. A mirror with good lighting, space to breathe. I unpacked my suitcases and hung my clothes in that spacious closet. Each piece had room, nothing cramped, nothing wrinkled from being shoved in too tight. I lined up my shoes on the built-in shelves. I placed my jewelry box on the dresser. I arranged my photographs on the nightstand. Philip smiling at me across 40 years of memories. Then I went downstairs to my home office and opened my laptop. For 3 years, I'd been supporting Garrett and Celeste in ways they'd stopped noticing. Or maybe they'd noticed and just stopped caring. Either way, the money had flowed one direction, from me to them. Month after month, bill after bill, emergency after emergency that was never quite an emergency. $300 every month for groceries. They'd stopped saying thank you after the first year, stopped pretending they needed it after the second. Started expecting it like it was their right. $500 every month toward the kids' private school tuition because public school wasn't good enough for their children. Even though public school had been fine for Garrett. Even though I'd offered to tutor them myself. I had a nursing degree and I'd helped put Garrett through college. But Celeste had looked at me like I'd suggested teaching them to read by candlelight in a cave. $200 a month savings by keeping them on my car insurance policy. They'd promised to pay me back for their portion. That promise lasted 6 months before excuses started. Before we'll get it to you next month became, you don't really need it back, do you? $120 every month for the cell phone family plan because they had asked to be added. Temporarily 3 years ago and temporary had become permanent without discussion. Their phones were newer than mine. Unlimited data while I restricted my own usage to save money. They streamed videos while I waited for Wi-Fi. The credit card I'd given Garrett for emergencies. The one that charged between $400 and $800 every month for emergencies like new shoes and restaurant meals and entertainment subscriptions and things that were never quite emergencies but always seemed necessary at the time. I pulled up each account on my laptop. My fingers moved across the keyboard with purpose. With clarity, with the cold certainty of someone who'd finally stopped being afraid of seeming mean. First, the car insurance. I called the company and removed Garrett from my policy effective immediately. The representative asked if I was sure. I said yes. She asked if there was a problem. I said, no problem, just a change in family circumstances. She said it would save me $212 a month. I thanked her and hung up. Next, the cell phone company. I navigated through their automated system until I reached a real person. I need to remove a line from my family plan, I said. I gave them Garrett's number. The representative confirmed the change, removed him from my account. His phone would stop working by morning. I felt nothing. The credit card took 3 minutes. I called the company, reported it as lost, and had them cancel it and issue a new one only to me. Every pending charge would be declined. Every future attempt to use it would fail. They asked if I wanted to transfer the balance. I said no. The balance was Garrett's problem. Now I updated my email preferences on every account. Every bill, every statement, every notification would now come only to me. No shared access, no joint visibility, no way for them to track what I had or where it went. Then I opened my email and drafted a message to Marvin, my financial advisor. Marvin, please remove Garrett Winters as the beneficiary from all my accounts, investments, and policies. He is no longer to receive any information about my finances. I'll be in next week to update my will and establish a trust for organizations that help elderly people who have been taken advantage of by their families. Best regards, Rhonda. I read it twice, made sure the words said exactly what I meant. Then I hit send and closed my laptop. The house was quiet, peaceful, mine. I made myself a cup of tea, the good kind, the expensive loose leaf I'd been saving, and sat in my reading chair looking out at my backyard. A bird feeder hung from the maple tree. I'd installed it last month and had been watching cardinals and blue jays visit every morning. Tomorrow, I'd fill it again. I'd sit here with my tea and watch them eat, and I wouldn't have anyone telling me it was a waste of money. Or that birds were dirty, or that I was being silly. I slept in my comfortable bed that night. The mattress was firm the way I liked it. The pillows were memory foam. The comforter was down-filled and warm. The room was heated properly. No space heater clanking and glowing orange in the corner. No cold air seeping through garage door seals. No smell of motor oil. Just clean sheets and safety and silence. I slept better than I had in 3 years. The next morning, I woke up at 8 instead of 5. Nobody needed me to make breakfast. Nobody required me to start laundry or prep lunch or clean bathrooms before the day began. I could just be. I made myself scrambled eggs with real cheese. The good kind, not the cheap stuff. Toast with real butter that I spread thick. Orange juice I squeezed fresh from the juicer I'd bought myself last month. I ate slowly at my dining table, looking out at my backyard where morning light filtered through the trees. My phone buzzed. Text messages, 6 of them, all from Garrett. Mom, where did you go? Mom, this isn't funny. Celeste says we should talk. Mom, seriously, you need to call me. Did you really cancel the credit card? We need to talk now. I read each one carefully, noted the progression, the confusion to anger, the demand disguised as concern. The entitlement bleeding through every word. Then I blocked his number, pressed the button, and watched his contact disappear from my phone. Then I blocked Celeste's number. Then for good measure, I blocked both teenagers' numbers. Even though they'd never texted me anyway, except when they wanted money for something. I spent the rest of the morning organizing my house. I hung pictures on the walls using a level to make sure they were straight. Photos of Philip and me on our wedding day. Pictures from vacations we'd taken before he got sick. My nursing school graduation photo from 1979. Images of a life I'd built before Garrett decided I was disposable. I arranged my books by color on the living room shelves because it looked beautiful and there was nobody to tell me it was impractical or hard to find things. I set up my sewing machine in the spare bedroom and laid out the quilt pieces I'd been working on for 6 months. A wedding ring pattern in blues and greens. Something pretty to make just because I wanted to make it. Around noon, my doorbell rang. I checked the camera I'd had installed. One of the first things I'd done after buying the house. Security cameras at the front door, back door, and garage. Motion sensors, smart locks, all connected to my phone. All showing me exactly who was on my property at any time. Garrett stood on my porch looking rumpled and angry. His hair stuck up like he'd been running his hands through it. His jacket was wrinkled. His face was red. He pressed the doorbell again. Then again, then he started pounding on the door with his fist. Mom. Mom, I know you're in there. Open the door. I stayed upstairs in my sewing room. I turned on my machine and fed fabric through it. The whir of the motor drowning out his pounding. I focused on my stitches. Straight lines, even tension, corners that meant precisely. The mechanical comfort of creating something beautiful while my son fell apart on my doorstep. He pounded for 23 minutes. I know because I watched the camera footage later. 23 minutes of fist against wood, of doorbell ringing. Of him cupping his hands to peer through the front window, of him walking around to the backyard and trying the gate I'd locked, of him finally giving up and storming back to his car. He sat in the driveway for another 10 minutes, probably calling me, probably texting me, probably working himself up to come back and try again. But eventually, he drove away and I went back to my peaceful morning. That evening, I made myself dinner. Salmon with asparagus and wild rice. I ate it while watching a documentary about Antarctica. Something I'd always wanted to learn more about, but never had time for because there was always laundry to fold or dishes to wash or someone needing something from me. I took a bath in my soaking tub, used the expensive bath salts my friend Norma had sent me for my birthday last year, the ones I'd been saving for a special occasion. I decided surviving Christmas dinner with my dignity intact counted as special enough. I read 3 chapters of a mystery novel before falling asleep in my comfortable bed with good pillows and no space heater clanking in the corner. The next day, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Mom. Garrett's voice sounded strained, tight, like he was trying not to yell. Why did you block me? Where are you? We need to talk about what happened. What happened? I said slowly, keeping my voice calm. Is that you and your wife told me to pay rent? I can't afford or get out. So, I got out. Problem solved. We didn't mean. Look, Celeste was stressed. It's the holidays. Everyone gets emotional. We can work something out. Can you work out paying me back for 3 years of groceries? I asked. My voice stayed level, factual, like I was reading a grocery list. 3 years of insurance payments, 3 years of credit card bills, 3 years of tuition contributions. Can you work out giving me back the $61,920 I've given you since I signed over my house? Silence on the other end. Complete silence. I could hear him breathing. Could almost hear him calculating whether I was bluffing. That's what I thought. I said, Garrett, you showed me exactly who you are. I believe you now. Don't call me again. Mom, wait. We need the car insurance payment bounced and the cell phone bill came back declined. What did you do? I took care of myself. Something I should have done 3 years ago. You can't just cut us off. We have expenses. The kids need parents who budget properly and don't rely on their grandmother to subsidize their lifestyle while treating her like a living maid. Goodbye, Garrett. I hung up. My hands were steady. My heart beat normally. I felt no guilt whatsoever. No second thoughts. No urge to call him back and apologize. Just a clean, clear sense that I'd done exactly what needed doing. Over the next week, my phone rang 17 times from blocked numbers. I ignored all of them. I received 14 text messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably Celeste using friends' phones or getting new numbers to try to reach me. I deleted them without reading past the first few words. 3 emails arrived in an old account I rarely checked. The one I'd had since the 90s that nobody really used anymore, but I'd kept active just in case. They were from Celeste. Long paragraphs about misunderstandings and stress, and how we were still family and how could I do this to them at Christmas. I marked them as spam and moved on. A letter arrived at my new address 3 days after Christmas. Thick envelope, legal size. They'd found me through public records, probably looked up my name, found the deed to this house. Realized I'd been lying about having nothing. Realized I'd been testing them and they'd failed spectacularly. I held that envelope over my kitchen trash can and let it drop without opening it. Watched it fall into the garbage on top of coffee grounds and vegetable peelings where it belonged. Instead of obsessing about my old life, I built a new one. I joined a book club at the local library. 10 women, all retired, all smart and funny and kind. We met every Tuesday evening to discuss whatever we'd read that month. Nobody demanded anything from me. Nobody expected me to bring snacks or host at my house or do more than show up and share my thoughts. The first meeting, I almost cried when someone thanked me just for contributing to the conversation. I signed up for a painting class at the community center. Watercolors on Wednesday mornings. The instructor was patient and encouraging. The other students were friendly. We painted fruit and flowers and landscapes. Nothing fancy, nothing perfect, just the joy of putting color on paper and watching something appear that hadn't existed before. I started volunteering 2 days a week at a shelter that helped homeless elderly people. People who'd been exactly where I'd almost ended up. Cast aside by families who should have protected them. Abandoned by children who decided their parents were burdens instead of blessings. I met a woman named Darla who'd been living in her car for 8 months after her daughter evicted her to turn her room into a home gym. I met a man named Eugene who'd given his son $50,000 to start a business and ended up on the street when the business failed and the son refused to help. I met a woman named Patricia who'd raised 4 children alone after her husband died and not one of them would take her in when she couldn't afford rent anymore. Their stories broke my heart and hardened my resolve. I'd almost been them. Would have been them if I hadn't had Philip's life insurance. If I hadn't been smart with money. If I hadn't had the foresight to test Garrett before he could drain me completely. I donated money to the shelter. Not a huge amount. I wasn't trying to be a hero. Just enough to help. $5,000 to cover operating costs for a few months. Anonymous donation, no plaque with my name. No recognition needed, just the quiet satisfaction of helping people who deserved better. I met with Marvin, my financial advisor, and we crafted a detailed plan for my future. Conservative investments that would generate steady income without high risk. A monthly budget that allowed me to live comfortably, not extravagantly, but comfortably. Travel once a year, new clothes when I needed them, good food, books, art supplies, a life. We updated my will. Everything I had would go to charities when I died. Organizations that helped elderly people who'd been abused or abandoned, domestic violence shelters. Literacy programs, food banks, nursing scholarship funds, medical research. Things that mattered, things that would help people who needed help. Nothing for Garrett. Nothing for Celeste. Nothing for the grandchildren who'd never bothered to have a real conversation with me. Who'd never asked about my life or my past or what I thought about anything. Who'd sat at Christmas dinner scrolling through phones while their father told their grandmother to survive on her own. Marvin asked if I was sure. I said I'd never been more sure of anything in my life. Then I did one more thing, something that felt like insurance, like having a card up my sleeve that I might play later or might not. The uncertainty of it pleased me. I hired a real estate attorney, not the same one who'd handled the original house transfer. That had been Garrett's lawyer, someone Celeste had recommended, someone who'd hurried the process along without making sure I understood everything I was signing. This attorney was mine. Someone Marvin recommended. Someone careful and thorough and completely on my side. I asked him to review the transfer documents from 3 years ago. The papers I'd signed that gave Garrett the house. The papers I'd barely read because I'd trusted my son. Because I'd believed him when he said he'd take care of me forever. The attorney read through everything slowly, made notes, highlighted sections. Then he looked up at me and smiled. "Mrs. Winters," he said, "did you know there's a clause on page 7? I hadn't known, hadn't read that far. Hadn't realized my original lawyer, the one who'd handled the initial deed before Garrett's lawyer took over, had included protection for me. What kind of clause? I asked. A reversion clause. It states that if you're ever asked to leave the property or charged rent for the mother-in-law suite, the house immediately reverts to your ownership. It's ironclad. They signed it. They agreed to it. They just didn't read it carefully enough to notice. I sat back in my chair and felt something warm spread through my chest. Not quite happiness, something quieter, something that felt like justice. So, the house is legally mine again? I asked. The moment they demanded rent, yes, you'd need to file paperwork to enforce it, but legally you own that property. They breached the agreement. The house reverts to you. I thanked him and told him I'd think about what to do with that information. He said to take my time, said the law was on my side whenever I was ready to use it. I left his office and sat in my car for 10 minutes just thinking. I could take the house back. Could file the paperwork and force them out. Could watch them scramble to find a new place. Could enjoy their panic. Or I could hold on to that information. Keep it like a secret weapon. Let them think they'd won. Let them keep struggling with a mortgage they probably couldn't actually afford. Let them keep wondering where I was and how I was surviving. Let the uncertainty eat at them. I decided to wait to see what happened. To keep that card hidden until I knew exactly the right moment to play it, if that moment ever came. 2 weeks after Christmas, I ran into Celeste at the grocery store. I was standing in the produce section examining avocados when I felt someone staring at me. I looked up and there she was, my former daughter-in-law, the woman who'd screamed in my face at Christmas dinner. Who demanded $1,200 while wearing the designer sweater I'd helped pay for. She looked different, tired. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail instead of the sleek style she usually wore. No makeup, yoga pants, and a sweatshirt instead of the carefully coordinated outfit she preferred. Her expensive purse hung from her shoulder, but somehow looked cheaper now. Or maybe she looked cheaper, worn down, worried. She froze when she saw me, her mouth opened like she was going to say something, then closed, then opened again. Rhonda, she finally managed. My name sounded strange coming from her now. Uncertain, almost respectful. Celeste, I said. I selected 2 avocados and placed them carefully in my cart. Move toward the tomatoes like this was a normal Tuesday morning, and I hadn't seen the woman who tried to destroy me. We've been trying to reach you, Celeste said. She followed me. Her cart was nearly empty. Just some generic pasta and sauce, the cheap kind. No organic vegetables, no expensive cuts of meat, no specialty items. Her whole grocery budget was probably what I used to give them every month for free. I know, I said. I examined tomatoes, checking each one for firmness. Taking my time, not looking at her. We need to talk about what happened about Christmas. There's nothing to talk about. I selected 4 tomatoes and placed them in a bag. Tied it carefully. Set it in my cart next to the avocados. I was upset that day. I said things I didn't mean. The holidays are stressful. And you meant every word. I interrupted. I looked at her directly now. Met her eyes. Let her see that I wasn't the same woman who'd lived in her garage. That something had changed. That she'd changed me and not in the way she'd expected. And that's fine. You wanted me to pay rent or leave. I left. Problem solved. But you cut off everything. The insurance, the phone. The credit card. We're struggling now. Garrett's business hasn't been as good as we thought it would be. We actually really need. That's not my problem anymore. I pushed my cart forward, moved toward the meat section, let her follow if she wanted to, but didn't slow down for her. The kids miss you. She tried. Her voice got higher. Desperate. They ask about you all the time. They want to know when Grandma's coming home. I stopped pushing my cart, turned to face her. Let her see my face. Let her read what I was thinking. No, they don't, I said quietly. They don't even know me well enough to miss me. And whose fault is that? She opened her mouth to argue, to make excuses. To explain how busy they were and how kids were different now and how technology made everything complicated and how she'd meant to encourage a better relationship. But things just got away from her. I didn't wait to hear it. I walked away, left her standing in the grocery store with her nearly empty cart and her tired face and her designer purse that suddenly seemed like a costume she couldn't afford to keep wearing. I finished my shopping. Bought everything I wanted without checking prices. Fresh salmon, good cheese, real butter, expensive coffee, a bouquet of flowers just because they were pretty. I paid with my own money. Money I'd earned, money I'd saved, money that was mine and nobody else's. That night, I video called my friend Norma. She'd moved to Florida 5 years ago after her husband died. Sold her house in the cold and moved somewhere warm where she could see the ocean and feel the sun. We'd been friends since nursing school, had worked together for 30 years. Had raised our kids in the same neighborhood, had survived loss and change, and everything life threw at us. We talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing. Books we were reading, shows we were watching. Her new hobby of collecting seashells, my painting class, and the watercolor of lilacs I'd completed yesterday. Memories from our nursing days when we were young and strong and thought we could save everyone. Near the end of the call, Norma tilted her head and looked at me through the screen with that look she'd always had. The one that saw through walls. "You sound different," she said. "Lighter, like something lifted off you." "I feel lighter," I admitted. "I feel free." And I did. For the first time since Philip died, since Garrett and Celeste had convinced me to sign over my house. Since I'd moved into that converted garage and started living like I was a burden instead of a blessing, for the first time in 3 years, I felt like myself again. Not the mother trying desperately to please a son who didn't value her. Not the grandmother tolerated but not loved. Not the convenient source of free labor and money. Just Rhonda. A woman who'd worked hard her whole life, who'd saved and invested wisely. Who'd loved deeply and lost greatly, who'd survived betrayal and come out stronger. I'd learned an important lesson, one I wished I'd learned sooner, but was grateful to know now. Family wasn't just about blood. It was about respect, about appreciation, about showing up and meaning it. Garrett and Celeste had shown me they were family and name only. So I'd quietly, calmly, completely cut them out of my life. No drama, no angry confrontations, no begging them to see my value. I'd simply removed myself and all my resources from their reach. And I'd never felt better. 3 days after running into Celeste at the grocery store, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Rhonda, it's Patricia from across the street from your old house." Patricia, my former neighbor, the woman who'd lived across from Philip and me for 20 years. Who'd brought casseroles when he died, who'd asked if I was okay when. She saw me taking out trash in the cold, wearing a thin jacket because the garage had no heat. "Patricia," I said, "how are you?" "I'm fine, honey, but I'm calling because I thought you should know something about Garrett and Celeste." My stomach tightened. "What about them?" "They're struggling, Rhonda. Bad. The house is falling apart. Gutters hanging off, lawn overgrown. I hear them fighting all the time. Loud enough the whole street can hear. And I saw Celeste crying in the driveway last week. Just sitting in her car crying. I should have felt something. Sympathy, maybe. Concern for my son. Worry about my grandchildren. But I felt nothing. Just a calm curiosity about what came next. "They're trying to sell the house," Patricia continued. "Put up a for sale sign yesterday." "Did you know they were selling?" Something cold moved through me. "No," I said. "I didn't know. I thought it was strange." "Didn't you sign that house over to them? Can they sell it without your permission?" I smiled. Actually smiled, sitting alone in my kitchen holding my phone. "Patricia, I need to go. Thank you for calling." I hung up and immediately called my real estate attorney. He answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Winters, what can I do for you?" "They're trying to sell the house," I said. "The one that reverted back to me." "Can they do that?" "No, not legally. They'd need to disclose the reversion clause to any buyer. And no title company would approve the sale once they discovered you're the actual owner. The sale would fall through." "What happens if I enforce the clause now?" "You file the paperwork. The court reviews it. Given how clear the language is, you'd have ownership back within 30 days. They'd be required to vacate." "Do it," I said. "File the paperwork today." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." I hung up and sat at my kitchen table, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not revenge, exactly. More like justice, like the universe correcting itself. Like consequences finally catching up to people who'd forgotten consequences existed. The paperwork was filed that afternoon. The attorney said they'd be served within 48 hours. That a court date would be set, that barring any complications, the house would be legally mine again by the end of January. I waited for guilt to arrive, for second thoughts to creep in. For that voice in my head that said, good mothers don't do this to their children. The guilt never came. Neither did the second thoughts. And that voice finally shut up because I'd realized something important. Good mothers don't let their children treat them like trash either. Garrett called me 4 days later from yet another unknown number. I answered because I wanted to hear his voice when he realized what I'd done. What the hell did you do? No greeting, no pretense of civility, just raw anger. You're taking the house back? You can't do that. Actually, I can, I said calmly. There was a reversion clause in the transfer agreement. You signed it. You agreed that if you ever asked me to leave or charged me rent, the house would revert to my ownership. You did both. So, now it's mine again. That's not you can't. We have a realtor. We have buyers interested. Then you'll need to explain to them why the sale can't go through. Might I suggest telling them the truth? That you kicked out your elderly mother and tried to charge her rent in violation of your agreement? See how sympathetic they are? Mom, please. We made a mistake. We're sorry. We need this house. We need the money from selling it. We're drowning here. You should have thought of that before you told me to survive on my own. We have kids. Your grandchildren. What about them? What about them, Garrett? Did they say one word to me at Christmas dinner? Did they thank me for the gifts I bought them? Did they even look up from their phones when you told me to get out? Those kids don't know me because you never let them because you were too busy using me as a bank account to teach them about respect or gratitude or family. This is cruel. Taking our house, cutting us off. You're being cruel. No, I said Cruel was screaming at me over Christmas dinner. Cruel was smirking when you told me to see how I'd survive. Cruel was taking $60,000 from me over 3 years while I lived in a garage. I'm not being cruel. I'm being fair. I hung up before he could respond. Before he could beg or threaten or try to manipulate me the way he'd been manipulating me for 3 years. The court date arrived 2 weeks later. I didn't go. My attorney handled everything. Garrett and Celeste showed up with a lawyer they probably couldn't afford. It didn't matter. The documents were clear. The signatures were valid. The clause had been violated. The judge ruled in my favor. The house was mine. They had 30 days to vacate. I still didn't go to see it. Didn't drive past. Didn't want to see their faces or their packed boxes or their lives falling apart. I just wanted it over. My attorney handled the eviction process, made sure it went smoothly, made sure they had time to find somewhere else. I wasn't heartless. I didn't want them homeless. I just wanted justice. The house was emptied by the end of February. My attorney did a walk-rough and sent me photos. They'd left it in decent shape, surprisingly. Cleaned before they left, fixed the minor damage they'd caused. Maybe they'd finally realize they should show some respect, even if it was 3 years too late. I listed the house for sale immediately. Priced it fairly. It sold in 8 days to a young couple expecting their first baby. They loved the oak dining table Philip had built. Promised to take care of it. I sold it to them for below market value because they reminded me of who Philip and I had been 40 years ago. Hopeful and happy and full of dreams. The sale brought in $380,000 after paying off the mortgage Garrett had taken out and covering all the fees. I took that money and donated every penny to organizations that helped elderly people who'd been abused or abandoned by their families. Shelters, legal aid funds, programs that provided housing and support and dignity to people who deserved better. I kept a copy of the donation receipt. Not because I needed it for taxes. Because I wanted to remember, wanted to have proof that something good had come from something painful. That Garrett's cruelty had been transformed into help for people who needed it. 6 months passed, then a year, my life settled into a rhythm that felt right. Book club on Tuesdays, painting on Wednesdays. Volunteering on Thursdays and Fridays, time with friends. Time alone, time to read and think and exist without being needed for something. Norma came to visit from Florida, stayed for 2 weeks in my guest bedroom. We cooked together and laughed together and cried together when we talked about Philip and her late husband, Robert, and all the ways we'd loved and been loved and survived when we thought we couldn't. You did the right thing, she told me one evening as we sat on my back porch watching the sunset. Cutting them off, taking the house, all of it. You did exactly the right thing. Sometimes I wonder, I admitted if I was too harsh, if I should have given them another chance. How many chances did they give you? Norma asked. How many times did they thank you? How many times did they show you respect or gratitude or love? They had 3 years of chances, Rhonda. They used everyone to take advantage. You didn't punish them. You just stopped letting them hurt you. She was right. I knew she was right. But it still helped to hear someone else say it. Someone who'd known me for 40 years. Someone who'd seen me at my best and worst. Someone who had no reason to lie to make me feel better. I never heard from Garrett again after the court date. No calls, no letters, no attempts to reconcile. Maybe he was embarrassed. Maybe he was angry. Maybe he'd finally realized what he'd lost and couldn't face it. I didn't know and I didn't ask. I was okay with that. With the silence, with the absence, with building a life that didn't include him because he'd made it clear I shouldn't be included in his. I learned something important in those months. Something I wished I'd known sooner. That being alone wasn't the same as being lonely. That having less family contact didn't mean having less love. That sometimes the healthiest thing you could do was walk away from people who treated you like you were worthless. I'd spent 3 years trying to earn my son's love and respect. Trying to prove I was valuable, trying to show I deserved better treatment. And I'd been doing it all wrong because the problem wasn't me. It never had been. The problem was them. Their greed, their selfishness, their complete inability to see me as a person instead of a resource. So I stopped trying, stopped hoping, stopped waiting for them to change. And in that stopping, I found something unexpected. Peace, freedom, joy, a life that was mine and nobody else's. If you've ever been told you're a burden, that you're asking too much, that you should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention and respect people throw your way, I need you to know something. You're not the problem. The people making you feel that way are the problem. And you have permission to walk away, to cut them off, to choose yourself. To anyone who's ever been in that converted garage. Literally or metaphorically. Living small so someone else can live large, giving everything while getting nothing. Staying quiet while being disrespected. Your life is worth more than that. You are worth more than that. And it's never too late to save yourself. What lesson hit you hardest from this story? And if you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have given Garrett another chance, or would you have cut him off even sooner? I want to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments below. Don't stop here. Click the next video on your screen right now and watch another powerful story from our channel. There's one about a woman who inherited everything when her family thought she had nothing. You're going to want to see how that turned out. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. These stories matter. Your story matters. And maybe by sharing mine, I can help you find the courage to choose yourself, too. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. I'm Rhonda Winters. I'm 68 years old. I survived being treated like nothing by people who should have treasured me.